Hey, everybody, it's that time. It's time to look at the November 2024 Heritage Signature Auction results. It was an interesting auction. We had some highs, we had some lows, and some really exciting stuff, and some stuff to talk about. So let's get started. We're going to start with the biggest book in the auction, the Action Number 1 CGC 3.0 Cream to Off-White, which failed to sell. So the reserve was listed at $800,000, $960,000 with buyer's premium, and it just sat and didn't sell. Not a great result. Obviously, we can't compare everything to the 2021, 2022 period without acknowledging that that period was a little crazy. That said, it was a disappointment to see this book fail to sell. It's not the best looking copy. I mean, it's honestly pretty ugly. It's faded. It's not great looking, but still, it's an unrestored Action 1. I was expecting it to sell. I was expecting it to sell for kind of at least 1.2 million. So this is not a great result. But we do have some great results coming up. So, cheer up. Rob Liefeld, New Mutants 98, first Deadpool story, page 14, original art, sold for $960,000. This was a great result. This is the second highest price paid for a panel page at Heritage, and unlike the Secret Wars number 8 page, which is historic in some way, but is, I don't know, the 80th appearance of the black costume, this is a truly historic page. This is the first time Deadpool appears in a panel on a story page. It's crazy. He's on the cover, but I mean, which is $1 million cover, clearly. So this is historic. It deserves every dime it made. It's not for me, as I mentioned. It's not my cup of tea. But I appreciate the hell out of it, and I know that it was a lot of people's grail. It was like the kind of thing that a lot of people dreamed about, and so it was fun to see it do as well as it did. When I previewed the lot, it was at $372,000, and I said I wouldn't be surprised to see it double or triple that amount. It didn't quite triple it, but this is still an amazing result. Detective Comics number 27, CGC Poor, 0.5, brittle pages. I didn't even look at what is wrong with this thing, because, I mean, my God. It looks like it was in a fire or was used to put out a fire, or brittle pages. There's chunks missing. I don't know. It got $312,000. It sold for more than the restored copy that I did mention in the preview, which is crazy. The one that I thought was the Christine Farrell copy, which I'm not reviewing in the preview. I mean, the review, but leave me alone. Yeah, crazy. $312,000 for this copy. If you saw the Sotheby's 1992 auction review I did recently, I was talking about a lot of 2 pages from Dark Knight Returns number 2 that were sold as a lot, and saying in that video that individual pages from Dark Knight Returns sell for over $100,000. Many of them do. I easily think the one page I showed in that review of that catalog is as good or better than this page. It's a battle page with the mutant leader. This is iconic, but that is, to me, bigger. I'm not saying that other one, the one in that Sotheby's catalog, is a $300 page necessarily, but it's comparable. So I still can't get over that Sotheby's catalog. 2 Dark Knight Returns pages in a single lot for $1,200. I mean, obviously, it was years ago. Things go up in value, but they didn't even split out the 2 Dark Knight Returns pages. They just let's bundle them together. Who cares? Okay, Detective Comics number 31, CGC VG 4.0, sold for $174,000. Considering the fact that Comic Connect just sold a 5.0 for $174,000 in June, a little bit over $174,000. Getting $174,000 for this ugly 4.0 is like, I don't know, a testament to the power of Heritage or something. I don't know, but it's a good result. I mean, it's really strong. Fun Comics number 73, CGC 8.0 Off-White White. I was expecting, hoping, thinking something that this would get between $200,000 to $300,000. So this is clearly a bargain for someone. A 6.5 sold for $120,000 in 2023. A 7.0 sold for $114,000, also in 2023. $144,000 for this book is a bargain. I mean, it's got a dust shadow. I don't know what else you would do to complain about this book. Key book, nice looking. I don't know. I think somebody got a bargain. Hopefully, someone in my audience will come through and say, "Hey, I got it. It was awesome. It's never going anywhere." Batman number 11, CGC 9.4, Off-White to White. In the preview, I said something along the lines of, this copy sold for $36,800 in 2003. The other 9.4 sold for $65,725 in 2016 and $46,306 in 2012. Is this a $100,000 book? The current owner is taking offers of over $125,000 on Heritage's make an offer system, so they certainly think so. And it sold for $132,000. So I'm thinking this is a pretty good result. This is strong. I thought that was a strong ask, not impossible. Like somebody could have ponied up $125,000 for this book, but that was strong. It was aggressive, and they got it. Well, they got more than that, so not bad. Like I said in the preview, I could have talked about like 4 or 5 Daredevil pages in this auction. It was a really good selection of Daredevil stuff. Including some stuff from later in the run, which isn't generally thought of as kindly because it was, Miller layouts and Klaus Janson finishes, so more than just inking. But, some of the stuff is really good. This is an example. Like, this is a great ninja battle page from that kind of Janson-Miller era. And I have clear memories of this page, especially the top panel of Daredevil, just like such a heroic image, and the ninjas are around him. The guy in the back is going to stab him in the back. I love it. And I remember being a kid and just thinking, this is so cool. And I still think it's cool. Like, it was a long time ago, but I still think it's cool. So yeah, Daredevil 189, page 8 for $114,000. So here's one of the, so we talked about some results that were bad, some results that were great, mostly for original art. So far, the great results. This one is a good result. I talked about this copy being maybe $50,000 to $75,000 for this book in the preview. And it got $108,000. So that's not bad. I mean, it's Batman number 1. It's one of those books, I talk about it all the time. At the low end, at the low grade end, you get people who can just maybe get on a ladder and stand on the top of the ladder and jump and maybe just reach and try and get one of these books. And then you get people that can afford a 3.0 and a 4.0, but they don't have one. And they're like, well, let me get this 1.5. And so you have people reaching down and you have people reaching up. And the bidder pool for these low grade books just goes through the roof. And you get results like this. Which is really strong for it. Again, this auction had so many ugly low grade books, and you gotta love low grade books. It makes some of these comics accessible for people. But this just had a particularly large number of unattractive mid to low grade books. I don't know what it means, but it just was coincidentally full of books that I went, hey. So. Not that I would love this book. This would be like my pride and joy, and I would never sell it. Because I've always wanted a Batman number 1. I've never owned one. So, there you have it. I've admitted my secrets. Fantastic Comics number 3, CGC 1.8, cream to off-white pages, sold for $90,000. So, okay, not the most common book. Like, if you look at GPA, there's a handful of sales, etc. It's an amazing cover, etc. We love it. We're all in love with this book. That said, if this is a 1.8 is a $90,000 book, what is the CGC 9.4 church copy worth now? It sold in 2017 for $243,000. It's got to at least be $500,000, right? $1 million? Is it $1 million classic cover? Maybe. I mean, it's crazy, like it's been interesting to see. And I've learned, recently that some of the romance covers, the classic romance covers, have gone through the roof. But we started with Suspense 3, and then just the results that got for a while, it just went crazy, and it spread to these other classic covers, which I think is great, right? The hobby isn't just Superman and Batman and Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four and whatever. It is this stuff, it's these beautiful golden age covers that just blew people away in the early years of the hobby. And so I appreciate the heck out of something like this, but I mean, it is a, Fantastic Four #3, CGC 9.4, Edgar Church is what you'd have to value it at $1 million. Whether or not somebody would pony up that much money for it, I don't know, but you'd have to value it there, right? So crazy result. And of course, I didn't mention this in the preview. So you'll see that there's some things that I mentioned in the preview that I'm not even going to cover here because the results were just kind of meh. And then there's other things that I didn't even notice in the preview that I want to call out. And this is one of them. This book is just a crazy result. You get a lot of really high value dollars value for a lot of low grade books at the top of this auction, which is fascinating. Okay, so this is not a low grade book. This is the highest grade copy of Showcase number 17. First appearance of Adam Strange. As I mentioned a couple of times, up until recently, the highest graded copy was a 9.0. This is freshly graded, this 9.2. Had no idea what it was going to sell for. It's very difficult to know what the bidder pool for a book like this is going to be. And it went for way more than I thought. I kind of thought it would be a $50,000 book. I don't know if I said that out loud, but in my mind, I was maybe it's a $50,000 book. The 8.5, which is kind of spurred some of the conversation about Showcase number 17 here on the channel, sold for $13,200 at Comic Connect recently. So $84,000 is a much bigger multiple than you'd expect, right? So $50,000 is that kind of rough doubling that you get at the higher end. So 8.5 to 9 would go 13,000 to 26,000, and then 26,000. 9.0 to 9.2 would get you from 26,000 to 52,000, which is rough, right? Especially when you have one of a 1958 DC. People don't stop when it's quadruple the 8.5 price or whatever, right? You're not going to get another one. These books do not grow on trees, and they are rare, for a Silver Age book. So crazy result. Really cool. Very cool. Very cool to watch this one, from the earliest preview. Before I even, did the big video, I dropped breaking news about this one. So awesome to see. I've been talking about TMNT #1 for a while. One of the earliest videos on the channel, I talked about the $250,000 sale, which kind of broke my brain, and also about how much I love this book. So I don't want to see it completely crater. And so one of the things that we've been seeing is that Heritage has won a signature auction all year, and the last two of them sold for exactly $87,000. This one sold for $84,000. So I think that, yes, we're a long way from that $250,000 peak, and hopefully that person just cherishes that book and doesn't need the money, because it's going to take a while to get back to $250,000. But I think we are kind of at this $80,000 to $90,000 range for a 9.8 TMNT #1, which is fine. That doesn't break my brain. It was when we got to $205,000 and $250,000 in short order that my brain just shut down. This was Christine Farrell's copy, by the way. So add another $100K to the tally on that collection, which is, we still have a lot of books to go through. So, okay. So one of the things that when I started doing the $100,000 club list, which is a list I keep of books that would sell for over $100,000, which, as you can tell from this video, is now many, many, many books, and the list is no longer. For a while, it was actually complete. Like we thought about every book that could possibly sell for $100,000, and now there's multiple, just random things that I miss, or I don't have 35 copies of TMNT #1 listed or anything like that. But one of the things that we and I, but we talked about in the CGC forum and it shows and whatever, was when certain books would, every unrestored copy would be $100,000. So, of course, Action 1, Detective 27, it happened earlier, right? Every copy of those books, as we saw earlier, even a 0.5 sells for $300,000 of Detective 27. So that's long ago, broken that barrier. Superman 1 basically broke that barrier in 2017. And so this is a bad result. It's an ugly book. Again, the theme of this review is that there were a bunch of ugly books in this auction. But again, I would buy this. If it was like, this would be the one I'd target, right? If I was in the market for a Superman #1 right now, I'd be going for this because it's the cheapest one you're going to find. And you would expect that it would have more upward pressure because it is an ugly copy. It is a 1.0, but it is unrestored, and you could get there. You could make it. And it didn't make $100,000. And, other 1.0s, probably more attractive than this one, which has pieces missing and just is a mess and tape stains. And you look at the description of this one and then the grader's notes, and it is just it's a messy book. But, other 1.0s have sold for like $140,000. So to get $84,000 for this book is kind of a bummer. So, but again, hopefully somebody who bought this is like me and they're going to cherish it because it's a Superman 1. It's one of the coolest books in the hobby, no matter how ugly it is. So that's my hope, at least. Fantastic Four #1, CGC 9.8. So I talked about this book in the preview. We looked at the trend from kind of the early 2020s, where it was selling for a while for around $100,000. And then the last two sales earlier this year were for $63,000 and $66,006. So that's the new level, right? It's kind of $60,000. This is the third sale in a row for around $63,000 to $66,000. So, but that's a byproduct, as I said in the preview. It was like there hadn't been a 9.8 for sale for a long time. Prices had risen up. The pandemic bubble had driven prices through the roof. And then, of course, a lot more material has come out because people are like, well, I have this Fantastic Four #48 CGC 9.8 that I bought for $15,000. If I can get $75,000 before it, I think I'm going to sell it. And so, copies have come out of the woodwork, which has probably dampened, the prices. And prices in general have gone down on some of this kind of very hyped material. But yeah, this is now the new level. This is a great result. Why the Last Man? First appearance of Yorick in his straight jacket doing his escape Harry Houdini thing. It's a great result. It's really historic. If you were the kind of person like me that we're reading new comics at the time, it was one of several series that we really just gravitated towards, that weren't superheroes, but had, a lot of really great aspects of adventure and mystery and science fiction and human interaction and just these really kind of fun, different style of comics that were coming out at the time. And yeah, it's a great result, $52,800. Okay, so Hero for Hire #1, CGC 9.8. So I talked about how it kind of went, again, my brain broke. We went from $16,250 to $102,000, back down to $64,000. That $102,000 result just was insane. and now we've dropped down to $48,000. So, it's one of these arcs that we're going to see with several books. It's already happened. I've already talked about it a bunch of times. And what you want to look for is when they level off, and then you kind of know what the new level is. And a lot of them, the interesting thing is if you chart. So this book was $16,000 before it sold for $102,000. So if you look at the trend line from that $16,000, it's actually like we're going up to get to $48,000. That's actually a huge jump. It's just that you had this like hockey stick in the middle that falls off a cliff. But if you weren't involved in that $102,000 sale and you're just a Luke Cage fan, you should actually be happy because we've gone from $16,000 to $48,000. That's assuming that we level off here, which, as you can see with some of these books, we're at that period, right? We've got a new norm for these books. They might have gone up a little bit too high, but they've dropped back down. And the trend line is actually still going up. There's some bumps in the road for people, and hopefully, you're not one of them. Or if you are, you don't care because you love Luke Cage and you want to hold on to your book, which is fine, right? Like part of the economic value in terms of like economists of collecting and of owning these things is the pleasure of owning them. So if you spent $102,000 for a CGC 9.8 Hero for Hire #1 and you really love it and you've owned it for whatever it is, 4 years, and you're going to own it for another 10, you're doing okay. That's supposed to be fun, right? This is not buying stocks. If you wanted to just make money, go Bitcoin or whatever, right? Like comics are fun. Speaking of fun, Pep Comics number 22. CGC 1.0. This is not a bad looking copy. The huge piece missing is probably the most unattractive portion of this cover, this comic, but what the heck? It doesn't look bad. And solid price, I think. Compare this to the Superman #1, for example, right? $84,000 for Superman #1 in 1.0. Clearly, this is a more attractive copy than that Superman #1, but for this copy to sell for 50% of a Superman #1 is, if you extrapolate that out to the top, I don't think that the Church Pep 22 would sell for half of what the best known Superman #1 would sell for, or even what the Church Superman #1 sold for. That's, $2.5, $3 million, or if we're judging it against the best known Superman one, $5 million. I don't think Pep 22 Church copy is worth $5 million, but it does give you a sense of how hard Pep 22 is, and how much demand there is for the book, right? Like, and we don't know. We don't have a lot of high grade copies of Pep 22 coming out of the woodwork to compare with a high grade Superman #1. But for it to get 50% of an equivalent grade Superman #1 in the same auction is interesting. Now, of course, yes, the Superman #1 maybe sold for a little less than we expected, but it's still an interesting result. And again, this is a great example of a book that, like, I would love, because I've never owned a Pep 22. I haven't owned, to be honest, when I talk about Silver Age books, I've owned mostly everything. The only book I haven't owned is a Showcase 4. I think I've owned every other Silver Age book that I've ever wanted. Sometimes multiples, but many multiples. I've owned, 10 Daredevil ones, of course, right? But the Golden Age stuff, it was out of my league when I was a kid, and then when I was collecting full time, I was focusing on Silver Age. So there are very few of these Golden Age keys that I've actually owned. But this would be the copy I'd go for if I was in the market for a Pep 22. Although actually, it is difficult. So if you're in the market for a Pep 22, you probably should just get any copy you can get because they don't come around very often. Kevin Eastman, Peter Laird, Gobbledygook #1 cover. I wish I would have to deep dive on the boards and the CGC forum, and the CGC forum search is so bad. But I know that there was a lot of hype for this lot in 2011 when it sold for $5,700. And I remember that result just seeming like ridiculously bad. So $36,000 for this is a lot better than that result. But I feel like people were thinking it was going to sell for $50,000 then or something like that. I don't know. I did not write about it on my blog, so I couldn't find my thoughts on it. But I just seem to remember that it was like super hyped and then sold for not that much money. So this is a decent result. Star Wars #1, 35-cent price variant, CGC 9.4. I've talked about price variants a little bit. I think this is a great book. Not a great result. This exact copy sold for $56,400 at Heritage in November of 2022. So, ouch. But, as Overstreet says, prices vary wildly on this book. I don't think they were talking about CGC 9.4 copies. But this is definitely one of those hype cycle books. Star Wars stuff in general feels like it goes through cycles. I'm not an expert on like Star Wars, like action figures or whatever. I feel like it goes through cycles depending on what's happening in the larger kind of Star Wars universe, movie, all of that kind of thing. So I don't know if that had something to do with it, or it's just it was overhyped in that kind of COVID bubble era. But very cool book. I love 35-cent price variants. They're very difficult. And whatever the result for this book is, it's a very cool book. So hopefully somebody is really appreciating having snagged this beauty. Okay, Strange Tales #110, White Mountain Pedigree, CGC 9.2, off-white to white. A non-pedigree copy of this sold for $72,000 in 2022, which is, again, that kind of bubble era. A non-pedigree 9.2 sold for $30,333 in 2023. So I think people are clearly afraid of what the actual grade on this book would be, because otherwise this would be a very attractive copy. White Mountain, I love White Mountain. It's my favorite Silver Age pedigree. As I've talked about, it's a great key. It's, the number on the cover is, the number on the label is really nice, 9.2. But if you look at the grader's notes, which I have, it's kind of scary, and it's an old holder. So it's just, I don't know, maybe that's what it is. Or I don't know, people are just sick of Doctor Strange. I don't know, but it's not a great result. Which is a bummer. It's a bummer for me because I always root for White Mountain copies to do well. Action Comics #1, Archie Comics #1, CGC 3.0, sold for $18,000. This is just like where this book lives now in this grade. I don't know when Archie #1, because Pep 22 is like this thing, kind of there's more Archie #1s. I guess that's part of it. But Archie #1 has been in kind of a soft zone for about 10 years. We had this $18,000 sale, and then I talked about it sold for between $16,000 and $31,000 over the past 10 years, and it's kind of like oscillated in that range over that time, and that's like a dozen sales or something like that. And it's just, it hasn't moved really. It's actually gone. If you look at the first sale was $20,315 in 2014. And then the last two sales were $18,000 and $16,766. So it's gone down overall. So I don't know, interesting, because it's a really like coveted book. It's a very cool book. I don't know why it's had such a hard time. But that happens, right? Like you have periods where there was a period where Marvel Comics #1 was just like impossible to get a good price for. It was selling for below guide value in CGC holder, which was like unheard of at the time. And now it's actually doing really well. So, which is, I'm happy to see. So maybe I'll be reporting on Archie #1 is doing really well in 10 years. And there we go. I'm going to end with this. Bernie Wrightson Swamp Thing #1 splash page 21, sold for $66,000. And this is just like, how did I miss this one in the preview? I love Wrightson. I love Swamp Thing. It's not like the moodiest, like, horror page from, the Master of the Macabre. But it's a great splash page from one of the most important comics of the 70s by one of comics' most important artists. So I don't know how I missed it. I should have pointed it out. I'm pointing it out now. I'll take the lump on this one, mea culpa. But now you've seen it, and you know that it sold for $66,000. It's very cool. Such a dynamic artist, and just his inking is just like amazing. So when they talk about spotting blacks, right, it's like the solid areas of black that define the overall shape of the page, and he was just a master at it, among other things. So, and with that, we're done. So I haven't done this before. The whole auction realized $16,596,970. Which, if you look back at some of the auctions in the 2010s and especially early 2000s, that would have blown my mind. These were $2 to $3 million auctions, $5 million auctions. But these days we see $20 to $30 million individual auctions from Heritage. So this one, barely registers. It did have the biggest book in the auction didn't sell, so it would have been kind of $18,000 potentially. I mean, $18 million potentially if the Action #1 CGC 3.0 had sold. The prices in this one were certainly up and down. The Action #1, like I said, selling was a big hit, but some of the other comics, and especially some of the original art, really picked up the slack. But it was interesting because it's not just like all bad news or all good news. It was really an auction where you had to kind of look at individual results and take them each on face value. So anyway, thank you if you've stayed with me this far. Thanks for checking out the video. Remember to like and subscribe if you're into this sort of thing. I'll see you shortly next week with a preview of the upcoming Comic Connect event auction, which, as always, has some really interesting stuff. And until then, have a good one. Thanks.